welcome to Digital Shift, also known as Corporate Evolution Tales. Join us as we dive into the dynamic world of digital transformation. From illuminating case studies to captivating narratives, we uncover the stories behind companies' journeys toward digital excellence. Whether you are a seasoned corporate leader or an aspiring innovator, our podcast explores the shifts, challenges of modern business evolution. Hello everyone, this is another episode of Digital Shift, aka Corporate Evolution Tales, and today my guest is Tory Bjorklund. Thank you so much, Tory, for joining me today and sharing your experience in digital transformation. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you, Miriam, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Amazing. Okay, maybe we can start from your introduction about your experience and any information that will be interesting for our audience.
Yeah, sure. So I have been in the technology industry for quite some time. I started my first consulting company in 1987. A lot of what we did was focused on engineering and manufacturing companies and implementing both software and networking. At that time, Novell Networks was big. We did a lot of Novell Network implementations and other MRP, ERP systems, CAD/CAM systems, that sort of a thing. Back in the 80s, mid to late 80s, and then into the 90s, I started a software company in 1989 that did integrations between CAD systems and ERP systems, and just been involved in a lot of different kinds of technology initiatives with small companies and large companies. IBM was selling our software for a while, and we were helping implement pretty large scale projects. And then also one of my clients actually approached me and wanted to start a manufacturing business, and that actually a company that built a technology for manufacturers, and having a manufacturing business to utilize the technology, prove it out, and then sell the technology. And that's in 1996 as the Agard Group, and started other software companies and consulting companies since then as well. So I've been on kind of both sides of the table, so to speak, on the consulting side as well as the manufacturing side as well. So, pretty broad set of experiences that I bring to the table.
Yeah, definitely. I think we will have very exciting discussion about digital transformation with you, just taking into account the amount of years that you are in this field. So let's start from general question of what is digital transformation for you, how you see it, how is it nowadays?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, let's talk about what it means. Today, it's kind of a buzzword, right? A lot of people are using it. If you're upgrading an ERP system or something. I had somebody reach out to me and say, I need help with digital transformation, and they were implementing QuickBooks. So it's kind of a buzzword. What I mean by digital transformation, what it means to me is any technology initiative that is transformative to the business. So basically, if you're trying to change how you do business, expanding into new channels, new markets, changing the way that you do your existing business, those kinds of things. It has to have a transformative impact on the business. That is transformation side of it. And then the digital side of it is that you're using technology to help accomplish that. And the state of digital transformation is frankly abysmal. It's in a bad state. It fails quite regularly. The initiatives fail quite regularly, especially if you measure success by completing the initiative on time and within budget, but having the intended impact on the company. And usually you don't get all three of those. And if you're trying to get all three of those, you get up into the 90% failure rates.
Definitely agree. And so you mentioned about having like this checklist or saying that we are completing it just because of like being within the date deadlines or like within the budget. Do you think there are any KPIs or like the success metrics that we can use to understand that digital transformation was done well in the company?
Well, I think that's going to be unique to each initiative, but I think really you need to start there. You want to ask the question of what is it that we're trying to accomplish, and then how can we measure that? How do we measure it today? Because you want to start with a baseline. So for example, if you're wanting to get into, let's say, a new market. For example, I had a client that they sold their products just through retail stores, and they wanted to begin to sell online direct to the consumer. And in the process, what they needed to do was define, well, we have X amount of annual sales through these channels. When we get
Yeah.
done doing the transformation that we plan, we want to have X amount of sales through these other channels, through the e-commerce channels, which there were going to be multiple, but maintain, or maybe they would lose the, whatever they needed to get those numbers in place and say, we're going to go from X amount of sales a year in the retail channels to X amount a year in the retail channels in the future, plus X amount a
Right.
year in these other channels. So you need to decide what it is you're trying to accomplish and then go from there to measuring, and you always want to have your objectives to be from and to, from this number to
Yeah.
this new number. And that's really one of the mistakes that I think people make is they're undertaking a significant initiative, and they don't really have any metrics to see if they've succeeded. Particularly if it's a matter of updating and upgrades. Some company that we're talking with recently, they're on SAP S3, and they're like, well, we need to upgrade to S4 HANA, and it's like, well, why? I understand why you would feel that way, but what's the business reason for that? And what are your outcomes that you're intending to gain? And so we had to kind of go through that exercise and get those answers. And there were legitimate answers. They just hadn't really thought about that. So when you get done, you want to know whether you've succeeded or not. And the only way to know whether you've succeeded is to ask the question up front, what does success look like?
Yeah, agree. And do you think that there are any specific stages for digital transformation, like at the beginning, something, and
Yeah.
maybe like, yeah.
So I've really developed a process for transformation, and I've broken it into 3 separate stages. And the first stage is the preparation stage. The second stage is the execution. And then the third stage is what I call sustain. And that's where really making those changes part of the DNA of the company. Because sometimes what happens is people they go live with some technology initiative, and then their users kind of backslide into doing what they've always done, and they're not really gaining the value of that expensive implementation. So you want to make sure that you've got that third stage as well. And really the value is gained from the first and third stages. We're in the industry fairly competent in stage 2, in the execution stage.
Yeah.
Project management is pretty mature discipline, program management, and the technology, people are getting pretty good at rolling out technology and implementing technology. And as far as if there's custom development and things like that, there's a lot of really good mature processes, methodologies that are in place that people are good at implementing. And so we can actually get the work done. And it's not on the execution side where we fail. It's really on the preparation side and on the sustain side.
Yes, agree. And when we are speaking about these stages, one thing that comes to my mind is if it is possible generally to identify the parts of the process that can be digitalized actually, or some parts that should be improved through the digitalization. Do you think there is any technique or a suggestion for companies that they can take to understand, okay, this is the part that we can digitalize, or like identify at least the parts that have some gaps that can be filled in with the digitalization?
Yeah. So, these days with technology, there's a lot more that can be automated and digitized than what previously we were capable of doing with the current technology. But what really I encourage companies to do is to look at what their goals and objectives are. So they're focusing on the right area of the business, right? You don't want to boil the whole ocean. But then let's say, for example, we have a client that's wanting to really scale up their business. And one of the areas, their supply chain, and particularly their warehousing, is not going to scale. They need to make some changes. And so then you focus on those areas. And really what you want to ask, there's three different things that you want to ask is, what do we have to change? There's things that'll just be obvious. We just have to quit doing it this way, or we need to do it a new way, something like that. And usually, by the way, those are driven by a SWOT analysis that the company has already done, or some similar form of strategic planning where you go, these are our opportunities or these are our threats, and we have to do something about those.
Yeah.
Then you want to look at what should we change, and that's where you're looking at opportunities for efficiencies or effectiveness. And those are usually found through data like, for example, I had a client that said, we get out our estimates, our quotes. We get out our quotes within 24 hours, 80% of the time. But this other 20%, it's killing us. We need to try to figure out a reason for that and what we can do about that. And so that was kind of the area of focus on how can we optimize these things? What are the characteristics that cause the holdups on these quotes and that sort of thing? And so, you can usually identify those with business data like that. If you're tracking what your quote turnaround is, or your inventory turns, or your whatever the area is, generally speaking, the company can tell you where those problem spots are. And sometimes it's in quality, those kinds of things. So you want to say, well, should we change? But the other thing you want to do is you want to identify what I call the secret sauce. What is it that's unique about your company that you don't want to change? You might change the way they do it or whatever. That certain things, certain characteristics, it's like, we have to keep this. This is a part of what makes us unique and successful. This is our secret sauce. And commonly, like some of the clients that I've worked with, this would be something like the ability to customize the order for the client. We're not going to give that up. And that might have an impact on the ability to digitize this process. Surprisingly, it doesn't. Where there's lots of ways that you can do the configure price quote, for example, CPQ, things like that. There's technology that can help you have that same customer experience. But if that's your secret sauce, you don't want to give it up. So you need to focus on those three areas to identify the opportunities and threats that you have to address, the things that you should address, and then the things that you should make sure you don't break.
Agree. And I was going to ask you about challenges, but I think you also mentioned that, like in this answer, actually, that what kind of challenges companies can have during this identification of those gaps, etc. But one thing that I like to ask is, do you think that the communication, and specifically with the parts that are involved in digitalization or generally in that process, is one of the most important things, or is still about the technology that we are using?
So I'm not sure, like, if I'm at the communication in the project within the company, is that what you're?
Right, like during the process of digitalization, do you think that the communication is the key, or it's still the technology that we are using?
No. Well, first of all, the technology, making the right choice about technology, of course, is very important. But once that decision is made, that the technology is the tail on the dog. It is not the whole thing. It's not even the major part of it, really. So number one, yes, communication, and particularly communicating the vision for why you're doing what you're doing. Make sure that everybody that is a stakeholder that is impacted by the change understands why you need to do what you're doing. So that's number one. And number two, in fact, I just met with a CIO yesterday. We were talking about this, that they didn't have within the company really an agreed upon scope and vision. They had a charter, but nobody was referring back to that. And so some people, as soon as they would see, here's what we're getting, then they go, oh, that's not what we need. And yet it had been agreed that what they were trying to do was a minimally viable product. So that's, of course, it's not going to be everything that they need, but they kept forgetting that. And so you need to make sure that you're communicating the scope. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. So first, what's the vision of what are we trying to do and why are we doing it? And then number two, what is it that we're actually doing? We're not going to do this. This will come later. We are going to do this. This is what we're trying to do. That needs to be communicated early and often.
Yes.
And then, of course, how we're going to do this and what is your role, communicating to the people that have a role in it, in the project. Those things, aspects of communication are just pivotal. One of the most important things you can do.
And looking back, what are some key lessons or like insights you gained from digital transformation that you would like to share with the audience?
So what people gain from digital transformation, primarily, what I've seen when it's done well is that they become more competitive or sometimes leaders in a certain area. Now, we're all familiar with some of the things like Netflix, for example. They changed the game, right?
For sure. From where they started
Yeah.
and what they are now.
Yeah, but Amazon too. Now, I remember watching the metrics of how many people ordered online and how much of the Christmas, for example, Christmas purchasing in the US was done online. And that just, that it's crazy now. I mean, and that was so some of these are really cultural changes as well. But within a company, really the benefit is twofold, really. One is the initiative itself brings out competitiveness. It helps you to be more competitive in your marketplace if it's done properly. And that could be either gaining market share, or it could just simply be being more profitable and more viable as a company because you're more efficient or something like that. But the other thing that it does is it helps your organization learn how to be more agile so that the next initiative becomes easier. Again, if it's done properly, unfortunately, many of them aren't done properly. And what it does is makes people say, I don't want to ever go through that again, but if it's done well, people within the organization become much more agile. The operations become more agile. The organization itself becomes more agile. It also really, part of that agility is the organizational maturity, and really you find where your weaknesses are and you have to fix those in the process. And so your organization becomes more mature, which really is what is required to become more agile.
Yeah, agree. And while we are speaking about all these, so we spoke and mentioned the technologies that can be used, but do you have any specific tool in your mind or like platforms that are helping through the digital transformation?
Well, there's a lot of different ways throughout the digital transformation, but some of the things that are I mean, we can't go talk about digital transformation without talking about AI, right? I mean, and so that's becoming game changing. And so if you're talking about software development, for example, which is often involved in digital transformation, I've found AI to be a tremendous code review tool, and it's really better than a lot of the like peer review and things like that. I find that to be a tremendous tool. And of course, there's project management tools and things like that, which they're getting better and better all the time and easier to use. And so some of those kinds of things, really some of the big changes aren't so much technology, but the way people think. So the agile mindset, the design thinking, the product thinking as opposed to project thinking, or program management as opposed to project management. Some of these kinds of things, not so much technology, but it is a change in the way that we're doing things that really it has made somewhat of a difference. Now, it hasn't overall impacted the statistics, unfortunately, at this point. And I think that's something that we need to address in the industry, but they are making it much more likely to succeed if you use the tools properly.
Yes, agreed. And before we'll wrap up, I would also like to ask you about the advice that you would offer to other companies or the individuals to take into account when they are starting their digital transformation journey. So what will be your advice to them?
Yeah, the first piece of advice is be business first. Number one, business first. And what I mean by that is you don't look for technology and try to find a way to use it. So, I mean, one of the most common questions that I get and people at our IT world are getting is, what's our AI strategy? That's a bad question, actually. And I mean, I understand where it's coming from, and it's right to be asking, how are we going to be using AI in some way, shape, or form? But I think the real focus needs to be on, what do we need to do as a business? What are our goals and objectives? What needs to change? What should we change? What should we make sure doesn't change? Those kind of things, that you still have to be business first. And then some people would say people first, but really, if the business doesn't survive, your people aren't going to be happy. So business first, people second. So that's the next thing, is really enroll the people into the program. Get people behind it, help them understand why, people don't like change, just generally speaking. They don't like change. And particularly what they don't like is, they don't like what they're doing to change. They don't want to change the process. This is the way we've always done it. I hear that so many times in these kinds of projects. And so that's the third thing. So people second. And then the third thing is operations. Look at your processes. Really focus on the process and say, these processes are the processes that we're going to change. And then look at the technology. What technology is going to help us do the things that we need to do as a business, or that we should be doing as a business? And how do we make sure that that technology doesn't break the things that we shouldn't break? And then how do we enroll our people into embracing this technology and utilizing it? And the technology itself and getting it rolled out and whatnot, that has become to be the easier part. And even just the project management and program management, there's a lot of people that are highly skilled at doing all of that. But so that's kind of the advice I give. It's focus on business first, second, and your operations in that context, and then get to the technology.
Agreed, definitely. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Tory, for sharing your knowledge about digital transformation. Any last words, anything you would like to mention before we will wrap up this episode?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you again for having me. I appreciate it very much. I will mention that I'm working on a book that distills my process, and it's targeted to non-technical leadership, to executive leadership. And if people want to reach out to me, they can find me. Victoriafy.com is our company. They can find me on LinkedIn too, Tory Bjorklund. And I'm looking for people that want to be insiders and get early copies of parts of the book and stuff like that, and provide me feedback. So anyway, love to hear from some of your audience.
Amazing. I will make sure to tag you in the LinkedIn post so people have easier access to you. And definitely we'll wait for the book, and we'll be happy to read it and gain some knowledge myself too.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.